church. Come on, help me say it. My hand to Lord to thee. I know. Come on, help me. Let me hear you. If thou with Lord withdraw thyself from me. Oh, thou shalt I go. Thank you for your voices. Thank you for your voices. And I really ask for your prayers now as I try to preach the word of God on today. Daniel chapter 3, it's a very familiar text. And on this past Friday, we laid to rest one of our dear members. And I was talking to somebody from the Mount Pleasant Church, and they asked me how I've been doing. And I thought about these words that I'll preach about on today. And I went home and put this together. Verse 24, then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, rose up in haste and spake, and said unto his counselors, did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? And they answered and said unto the king, true, O king. He answered and said, lo, I see 4 men loosed, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. And the princes, governors, and captains, and kings' counselors, being gathered together, saw these men upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was a hair on their head singed, neither were their coats changed, not even the smell of the fire had passed on them. Let's read that again. They knew I had been through some situations, and they had not seen me since surgery and so many other things. And I thought about this text. The fire had no power, nor was a hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed. They didn't even smell like fire. And when they asked me, I told them what I need you to tell your neighbor. I don't look like what I've been through. That's what I need you to tell your neighbor. I don't look like what I've been through. And that might be your testimony too. I don't know. Tell them again, I don't look like what I've been through. The text today is a testimony to the might and the marvel of the Master. I've come today to tell you that our God is not a minute or miniature figure. Our God is great. And many times when we are faced with some seemingly insurmountable situations, we tend to forget about the might and the marvel of the Master. But let me remind you this morning, by way of recapitulation, that we have a great God. We have a God that can be trusted in tough and tight times. I ought to have 2 or 3 witnesses here, because somebody in this room, you've been through a tough time. You've been through a tight time. It may have been the loss of a loved one. It may have been financial difficulty. It may have been depression. It may have been a variety of things. But I am not the only one in this room that has experienced some tough and tight times. But I've come to remind you again, by way of recapitulation, that we have a God that we can trust even in tough and tight times. And there is a testimony in this text, because nobody knew about tough and tight times like this trio in the text that has come to be known as the 3 Hebrew boys. Let me give you the narrative real quickly. It tells us that these boys are faced with the possibility of incineration by way of a fiery furnace. I've got some Bible readers here. I have some biblical scholars. I see some homileticians here. And you already know that this fiery furnace was the punishment for anybody who refused to bow and to give obeisance to King Nebuchadnezzar's idol god. The text tells us that he had just constructed a great golden image. This image stood some 90 feet tall, and it stretched some 9 feet wide. It was an image of gold. It was a great image. But after the completion of this idol god, or this golden image, King Nebuchadnezzar is calling for a celebration. It is at this dedication ceremony of his idol god. Now, you got to know that this God is not like our God, because this God has eyes, but he can't see. He has legs, but no mobility. He has a mouth that's been muted. He has golden arms, but cannot embrace his subjects. Touch somebody and tell them, this God ain't like our God, because our God will walk with me and talk with me and comfort me and care for me whenever I'm going through. I think you ought to help me preach. Tell somebody, this God is not like our God. Our God heals the sick, and our God raises the dead. Our God lifts depression. Our God heals and forgives and loves. Tell somebody, this God ain't like our God. He may be high, but he ain't like our God. He may be wide, but he's not like our God. He may be golden, but he's not like our God. He may look good, but he's not like our God, because there is nobody like our God. Hallelujah. having a dedication ceremony. I wouldn't want a God I got to dedicate. I wouldn't want a God that I have to have a coronation. That means if I can dedicate him or have a coronation, that means that I came before he did. I want a God that was here before I got here. I want a God that didn't have a beginning, but he was the beginning. I want a God who began before the beginning ever began to be gone. I want a God who didn't start. He started the start that's been started all this time. I don't want a God, I wish I had one or two more witnesses, that comes after me. I want a God who goes before me. They are at this dedication of this golden image. He invites the elite, the higher echelon of society, to this dedication ceremony. And of course, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, better known as the three Hebrew boys, they were invited. At this dedication ceremony, a clarion cry went out, and the cry said that at the sound of the music, I want everybody to bow down, give obeisance, and worship this golden image. But the cry continued by saying that all who won't bow, you will be thrown into the fiery furnace and you will be demolished. The music started playing. Everybody bowed except for this band of brothers from the hill country of Judea. Shadrach, y'all know them, don't you? Meshach and Abednego. These boys taught me something when I was studying this lesson. They taught me something, and I'm glad that I've learned this. It's important to choose the company that you keep. Because I'm sure that everybody who was there didn't plan on bowing, but they were in the wrong company. And sometimes when we're in the wrong company, we have the tendency to do what the other folk are doing. So it is important that we choose our company carefully, because association brings about assimilation. You can say, I ain't gonna do it, I ain't gonna say it, I will never do this or that, but if you are in the wrong company, you will find yourself doing what you said I ain't gonna do and saying what I said I ain't gonna say. Shake a neighbor's hand and tell them, watch your company. Everybody you hanging with ain't the right folk to hang with. You need to find somebody that's trying to live right and trying to love God and trying to get somewhere. Oh, watch your company. Everybody, I feel a preacher today. Everybody didn't plan on bowing, but they could not stand to the pressure not to bow. Come here, Grace. I like these boys. I like these boys because these boys stood when standing was not popular. Oh, y'all missed that right there. Let me see if this side will catch it. I said these boys. They stood when standing was not popular. Can I tell somebody it's easy to stand when it's the popular thing? But what if you have to stand all by yourself? What if you the only one in the group that's trying to raise the standard? What if you the only one that's trying to operate in integrity? What if you the one that said, no, I don't do that. I don't drink that. I don't smoke that. I don't do that. Y'all do what you think. I ain't going to judge you, but I ain't going to put that in my body. If I have to stand all by myself, how many folk do I have in here that can stand if you have to stand all by yourself? I dare you to just high-five somebody and tell them keep standing. It's easy to stand in the church, but can you stand outside of the church when you're having to deal with devils and demons and dipsticks, and you got to be around a crowd that ain't trying to live holy? Can you still stand? I like these boys. Brother Map, I like him. Brother Jewel, I like him. Reverend Hickman, I like him. Brother Marshall, I like. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they stood when everybody was bowing. Well, you know, you always got somebody in the crowd that'll tell on you. So they ran to the king. Y'all know the story. Reported to the king. Now, king, we got a problem. I have 3 boys. These are boys you promoted. These are boys you gave that great job. I told you not to give them to them because they ain't even Chaldeans. They are not even from Babylon. They are from Jerusalem. And you said that they deserved the job. You gave them the position. You gave them the raise. Look at how they are returning the favor. Your big day came to celebrate your big God, and they wouldn't even bow. They kept standing. King said, bring them to me. He said, boys, I heard they told me you didn't bow. They said, yes, sir, that's right. Well, maybe you didn't understand. Maybe you didn't understand the severity of the charge. Maybe you don't understand what I could do to you if you don't bow. Maybe you don't understand that you'll never move up in this company if you don't bow. Maybe you don't know what I can do. I got the power to save your life or destroy your life. But since I like you boys, I'll give you another chance. And if your music plays again, if you bow, everything will be well. But if you don't bow, y'all know the text, don't you? You will be thrown into the fiery furnace this day. And then they raised the question, you see my God, he's a great God. He's 90 feet tall. He's 9 feet wide. He's a God of gold. You see my God, but if you don't bow to my God, let me ask you, because you boys, I heard y'all been talking about a God that ain't nobody seen. You've been talking about a God of Isaac, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but you have not produced any empirical data. I can't lay my hand on that God you talking about. I can't see that God that y'all have been talking about. So if you won't bow to my God, I want to raise the question, who is that God that will deliver you out of my hands? Uh-oh. That's where he messed up. He was all right as long as he was challenging the boys. But he messed up when he challenged the God. Oh, y'all didn't feel that. Of the boys. Touch somebody and tell them, you can mess with me, but if you challenge my God, God will fight my battle. Matter of fact, you better know if you challenge me, and I am a child of God, I've got a God who will fight my battle. Touch 2 people and tell them, he will fight my battle. Yes, he will. He said, who is that God? Deacon Holt, I hear the boys saying, King, now maybe you better sit down. Because you raised the question about that God that will deliver you out of my hands. King, you done messed up now because you've challenged our God. So sit down a minute. Let me tell you about that God. The God we serve, verses 16 and 17, is able to deliver us. And I like the way they started it. I like the way they started, Brother Williams. They started by saying, King, let me just give it to you in Ebonics. The text said we don't need to even give attention to this matter, but let me tell you in Ebonics, King, we ain't never scared. We ain't got to give attention to this matter when you know who you are and when you know what God is able to do in your life. You ought not lose sleep over everything. You ought to go on home and go to bed and go to sleep and not lose sleep over everything. You ought to look at that devil and say, we ain't never scared. So sit down, King. Let's tell you about our God. Our God is in the deliverance business. King, you don't know our God. In fact, nothing was made that our God didn't make. He made you. He made the gold that you made the God. He made the men that took the gold and made the God that we'll bow and you want me to bow down to. Our God stepped out on the corner of nowhere and start pulling somewhere out of nowhere. Our God scooped the valleys and made the hills, and he took a handful of stars and flung them out into space, and they are dancing like diamonds on black velvet. Our God batted his eye, and the thunder and the lightning flashed. He clapped his hand and the thunder rolled. King, let me tell you, I remember our patriarch Abraham was almost 100 years old. And his wife Sarah was almost 90 years old. Let me tell you about our God. They didn't have no children, but they wanted a child. God told them they were going to have one. But when Sarah was 89, Abe was 99, God told Abe, this is the day. I want you to go into that tent, and as you're going in, I want you to start singing, let's get it on. And whatever you do, you're going to get it on. And all I know, they got it on. And 9 months later, here comes a little meadows. That's the God we serve. I got to quit. And they said our God is able to deliver us from the fiery furnace. That's definitive, church. Then they came back. I'm almost where I'm trying to get to. They came back in verse number 18, and this is what shocked me. Because they had just said our God is able to deliver, and then they say, and he will deliver us out of thine hand. But verse 18, they came back and shocked me. They said, but if not. Y'all see it, don't you? We still will not serve thy gods, nor worship this golden image. But if he doesn't, that's the kind of folk God is looking for. See, some of y'all can shout if he does it. You can praise him if he delivers you. What if he doesn't bring you out? Is he still God? See, some of y'all can't say amen on that. I'm looking for about 15 but if not saints. I'm looking for somebody, if not folk. If he don't give me the job, if he don't heal my body, if he doesn't bring me out of this thing, I still ain't gonna bow. He's still God. Shake somebody's hand and tell him, even if he doesn't do it, I still love him. I'm still gonna serve him. I'm still gonna worship him. Even if he don't heal my body, if I stay sick, I'm going to my grave saying he's able. I'm almost there. Y'all sit down just a minute. I promise I'm almost there. I feel the fire burning now. Verse 19, let me walk the text, because I'm getting ready to get to my shout part. We ain't there yet, but we're headed. Verse 19, Nebuchadnezzar is mad as Hades. He said, heat the furnace. Y'all see it? Heat the furnace. Go to the next verse. And I wanted 1/7, back up to the second one. I wanted, there you go, 1/7 times more. These boys have defied me. I'm going to show them who I am. Heated hotter. They heated that furnace, and they took Shadrach. They took Meshach and that bad Negro. Tied their wrists. I'm trying to get where I'm trying to get to. Tied their legs. They locked their limbs. Tell somebody they locked their limbs. And they threw them in the fiery furnace. The fire so hot unto the men who threw them in. Y'all know the story. They were consumed. They couldn't withstand the heat on the outside of the furnace. At the mouth of the furnace, they couldn't deal with the heat. Shadrach, Meshach, and a bad Negro is in that furnace. They threw them in. They didn't even take the clothes off. They kept their hats on. They kept their coats on. They kept their clothes on. And King thought he had it made. He left. He left. And somebody said, wait a minute, King. You might better turn around. Something done gone wrong. King said, what's up? They ought to be dead by now. The men who threw them in, they were killed from the heat from the outside. So I know the boys on the inside got to be dead by now. He was leaving. They said, you better turn around. He looked. He started counting. 1, 2, 3. Wait a minute. I thought we threw 3 men. 1, 2, 3, 4. First thing that surprises me is that the guys are still walking around. I thought we bound their hands and their legs. How did they get loose? But what's really bothering me is that 4th man. That 4th man is scaring me because he looked like the Son of God. That's about to shout me, guys. Stay on me, camera. He looked like the Son of God. Let me tell you why that's about to shout me. Is God will let you go in the fire. But when you go in, he won't let you go in by yourself. Who am I talking to? Have you been in the fire? Have you been in the storm? Well, did you look around and he stepped right in there? Yes, I went in the hospital. Yes, I went to court. Yes, I got in trouble. But when I turned around, the Lord, shake somebody's hand and tell them he'll go in there with you. Tell somebody he'll go in there with you. The king said, I see 4 men. And then he said, they are walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt on them. And the form of the first man looked like the Son of God. And then Nebuchadnezzar called out to Shadrach, Meshach, and that bad Negro and said, did your God, now he's calling him the Most High God. You see, sometimes God has to show you who he is. Is there anybody in this room today? God had to show you who he was. And now, sometimes God will let you go through a situation and it looks like there is no exit. But then sometimes he uses what he's allowed you to go through to teach your haters a lesson. Because when your haters see what the Lord is doing in your life, they have to recognize that God is real. Shake a neighbor's hand and tell him, neighbor, my God is a real. I had to go through this. Touch somebody and tell them I had to go through it. Come on, tell them I had to go through it. Come on, tell somebody I had to go through because somebody needed to know who my God is. And even the haters were standing around. The folk who reported the boys, they looked at those boys. They looked at the boys and they were all right. They looked at the hat on their head and the hat was still intact. They looked at the clothes and the clothes were still intact. You know what they did? They went in looking just like I'm looking right now. They went in looking like your neighbor is looking right now. And when they came out, they didn't even have wrinkles in their clothes. The clothes didn't smell like fire. Didn't even have a smoke smell. You know what that means? I don't look like what I've been through. Come on, tell somebody. I've been through the fire and I've been through the flood. But look at me now. Y'all didn't look at no neighbor. Look at him and tell him, look at me now. I've been hurt. I've been knocked down. I've been kicked around. Tell them, look at me now. I'm still looking all right because I don't look like what I've been through because the Lord will take care of me. Now look at the text again. Their clothes are all right. Their hat is all right. Their coat is all right. But they went in bound. But they came out loosed. Can I tell you what happened? The only thing that the fire burned was the thing that had them bound. I wish I had a witness. Sometimes you gotta go in the fire and God will lose the fire to loose you of the very thing that had you bound. What had you bound? God let you go in, but he loosed everything that had you bound. Is there anybody here that's
has been loosed, you ought to wave your little hand. Is there anybody here? Did he loose you? Did he loose you? Shake somebody's hand and tell them, neighbor, I feel like lifting him up. Tell them, neighbor, I've been loosed. But can I tell you how they got loosed? Because I told you that they tied their wrists and they tied their legs. They had locked limbs. They tied their wrists and they tied their legs. They had locked limbs, but where they messed up, they locked their limbs, but they still had loose lips. Shake somebody's hand and tell them, neighbor, I still got loose lips. I may have locked limbs, but I still have loose lips. And when you're in trouble, when you're in the fire, and you still got loose lips, you can bow down and say, Father, I stretch my hand to thee. No other help I know. If thou withdraw thyself from me, why shall I go? Is it anybody in grace that's got loose lips? Open those loose lips and give God a praise. Open those loose lips and tell him, thank you. You brought me out. Tell him, thank you. You made a way for me. Tell him, thank you. Won't he bring you out? Won't he bring you out? Touch one person. Tell him he will bring you out. Find you a second neighbor and tell him, neighbor. Come on, tell him like you mean it. Tell him, neighbor. Tell him, neighbor. The Lord will. The Lord will. He will. He will. He sure will. If you know he will. I need somebody. I need anybody. I need everybody. Shout yeah. Shout yeah. Shout yeah. 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 Just tell somebody, I don't look like what I've been through. Tell another neighbor, I don't look like it. I don't look like it. I better quit.